spreadsheets to this day.
Mr. Spreadsheet. So hearing you say that he was, and I didn't know that he was anti-countdown, I feel like that's the complete opposite of what I would expect Colin to say.
His reasoning was he almost kind of wanted to block it out because this is the one portion of the year where things in y'all's line of work aren't quite as chaotic. And he knows, hey, when football season gets here, my life is about to go in 12 different directions again. So that was kind of his reasoning behind it, which I understood, but I still like to bother him about it.
And Jack Veltri has done a tremendous job of sliding in and trying to fill those shoes, which are big shoes, because Colin did a tremendous job when he was at Gamecock Central with us. That's really that position on the GC staff is really the grunt work of it all, because you're traveling a lot, you're going to the game. So I understand that.
Sure.
I understand that, especially when you're covering baseball. I mean, baseball can be tough. I mean, obviously the pitch clock speeds things up a little bit, but you're covering,
not as much as in Major
40
League
plus
Baseball.
games, 50 plus games, or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Driving God knows how many hours and miles, and I think with the longest road trip that I think he would have made last year. Well, no, Veltri went out to Ole Miss this year. I mean, that's at least 6 hours.
I'm trying to think if he went out or if our intern.
Maybe he didn't, because basketball is still going on. Maybe he didn't go to that one.
I think that may have been the same weekend of, I don't know if it was the SEC tournament or the NCAA tournament, because I think I was with Jack that weekend, either in Nashville or Pittsburgh.
Maybe that's right. Regardless, a lot of long road trips in the SEC, and now that you're adding Texas and Oklahoma, those trips are only going to get longer.
Yeah, so I think, Colin is enjoying his life after journalism.
He likes having a 9-to-5.
Yeah.
I can attest to that. But with this, countdown to the season as we go through the summer, and again, as I highlighted, you've been doing a lot of good stuff on Gamecock Central with, highlighting individual players who lead up to the season. A lot of focus on these transfers because you've brought in so many. We have so many unanswered questions about this team. We have an idea of what we think's going to happen with some of these position groups, but we don't know for sure. We don't know how these guys are going to gel as a group, who's going to take more reps over the other, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing as we get closer to the season.
No question. And one thing, too, when you look at the number of transfers that South Carolina was able to pick up in the offseason, being able to get these players in as quickly as possible, having them go through spring practices, it is huge. Not only because you're able to get a sense of, okay, what is everyone like? You get to pick up the playbook. It's the little things, too. It's, where the heck's my classroom?
Yeah.
Where's the meeting room? Where the heck is the bathroom in the facility? I mean, just these little things that you're not thinking of. And I know that sounds silly, but just trying to get comfortable. So more than anything, being able to have so many of those new faces in the building and to be able to get acclimated a little bit, right? Get acclimated. Certainly things will pick up. Things have been picking up for them right now. I mean, I was talking with Debo Williams, just put the interview out last night. He has a football camp coming up this weekend at White Knoll from 8:30 to noon. Youth football camp. He's excited to do that. But then we talked a lot about what's going on from a football standpoint. They're in week 4 of their summer workout phase. And what he mentioned to me is, I mean, he does 2-a-days. God bless him. They'll do like a workout in the morning, and whatever they're doing in the morning, he'll do the complete opposite in the afternoon. And he said that a lot of players are starting to do that with him, and that has created incredible opportunities to be able to build that team chemistry, team bonding, and that includes the new faces as well. So, I mean, there's been a lot of that going on as well.
And that linebacker room in particular is one that's very interesting. We know what we have in Debo and expected to be a big contributor once again this year. Bam Martin-Scott came along at the end of last season when they switched things around from a scheme standpoint on defense. And then you bring in two guys that I think people are really excited about, Demetrius Knight and Bengali Kamara, to kind of round out that linebacker room from an experience standpoint. I mean, Demetrius Knight was at Georgia Tech, went to Charlotte, played his guts out there, racked up a lot of tackles, was very much a sideline-to-sideline guy. Now, it seems like they're going to be implementing a lot of 3-3-5 again this season, as they did a lot towards the end of last season. But how this shakes out, who you use where at certain spots on defense in that middle, there's going to be very interesting to see how they split these reps up with these guys.
Yeah, when you talk about Bengali and you talk about Knight, two players that have plenty of experience. And obviously one played at Charlotte, one played at a Power 5 at Pitt. But when we talk about experience, it's not just the experience factor. It's proven talent. Last season, those two players combined for over 150 tackles, more than 12 sacks, more than 12 tackles for a loss, and I believe it was like 3.5 sacks. Like, those guys have proven themselves. Now, the thing about it is they come on in here, what is it going to be like? Are they going to be able to just hop right into things and be able to do what they did at their old school? That's the tough part to say, because it's not as simple as saying, all right, well, this guy was playing at Charlotte. I don't know if he's going to be able to make an impact right away. Really?
Right.
Really? I mean, go ask Nate Atkins. Nate Atkins didn't play at a big school. Carlins Patel didn't play. Carlins Patel was a friggin' Division II kid. Mario Anderson, when he was here, I mean, things picked up for him as the season went on, which was the same case with Carlins Patel in Beamer's first season. So the point being is it's tough to say, okay, well, how are they going to be able to adjust to the SEC? Yeah, that's part of it. But I think more than anything, how do they adjust to understanding the scheme and knowing that they're a piece of it now? They're a part of it. That's not to say that they were the focal point wherever they were before.
Sure.
But when you're at this level and you're playing in the SEC, certainly it's not all about you.
Well, and I think you look at it from the standpoint as well that you lost Pup Howard, you lost Stone Blanton, and you sure would have loved to have had those guys come back for another year. But if you're replacing them with Demetrius Knight and by Gali Kamara, I feel like you can safely say that your linebacker room got better from that experience standpoint of those two guys coming in to replace what you lost.
Yeah, and then you mentioned earlier about Bam Martin Scott being able to play more was huge for him. And certainly the scheme, being able to have a guy that has that much speed coming off the edge, that played perfectly into his skill set. So I think more than anything, this is a room that certainly has guys that have proven themselves here, but being able to go into the portal, being able to bring guys in that have proven themselves at other schools, and you blend that together, I really like what that linebacker room can be. But I also think, too, when we talk about some of those outside linebackers, I'm interested to see how creative Clayton White gets when you're talking about the talent that is also in that edge room.
Sure.
Because really, more than anything, when you talk about outside linebackers, edge, especially in a 3-3-5, it really doesn't make a difference. I mean, you could just put a title on it, but really, it doesn't make a difference. Corey Miller, guy that I had a chance to work with at Watch Fox. You go back to the early 90s when he was playing at South Carolina. He was in a role that was pretty similar. He'd be playing defensive end, but he'd also go back a little bit outside linebacker, standing up. It really didn't make a difference what the title was, and he did that in the NFL as well with the New York Giants and then ended his career with the Minnesota Vikings. So I bring that up because when you look at what they have at outside linebacker combined with just some of the freaking talent in that edge room, oh my goodness. I mean, there's a lot of speed, there's a lot of length, physicality. I think we could really see South Carolina get creative this year, especially at that position. If they're putting pressure on in the back end, safeties, corners, nickel, it's going to help them out so much more. It's going to be like makeup. I call it like makeup.
Sure.
They're going to be able to cover up some of the blemishes if there are any blemishes there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the defense as a whole is going to be under, the microscope this year because last year was obviously very disappointing. Got better as the season went along. But again, if there was one request to do this offseason was get out there and get more experience at a lot of different spots, which they very much did at pretty much every level of the defense. Talk about linebacker, talk about defensive line, even bringing guys in at edge, like bringing back Gilbert Edmond, bringing in a Kyle Kennard, where you feel like you bring in a lot of valuable experience that, again, we don't know how that's going to shake out and who's going to get what reps where and who's going to be the leader at those specific groups, but you bring in guys that have been around the block, that have played a lot of college football, that theoretically should end up working out okay. And
it's only going to motivate the other guys that have been in that room. I mean, I've heard nothing but incredible things about Brian Thomas Jr. Certainly comes from a pretty talented family, right? His father did pretty good things in the NFL.
Right.
So we've seen what he's been able to do, even going back to last spring ball. In that spring game, he was able to carry some of that momentum into the fall, had another phenomenal spring game. And from just talking to people inside that building, they expect him to just take off this year. And I'd also throw in there, and I mentioned players to watch this year, Desmond Umeozulu feels like he's going under the radar simply because you add in, a couple players from the transfer portal. Dylan Stork comes in. Brian Thomas, as I mentioned, and he kind of just gets lost in the mix, it feels like. He's lengthy. He's got the size of an SEC player.
Right.
And he appeared in all 12 games last season, so they really like him. So I'm interested to see how he's going to factor in.
We'll continue this conversation on the other side because people are so quick to give up on guys or just write guys off after 1 year, and that's not right. We'll dive into that coming up next. Halftime show. He's Mike Yuba. I'm Tyler Head on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuva hanging out here on this Thursday, navigating through talking season, 72 days away from things kicking off with South Carolina and Old Dominion August 31st. 65 days away from week 0. You week 0 guy?
I know there's a lot of week 0 purists in this state.
I don't know if it's purist.
No, they're purist. I've been saying this for as long as I've been down here. It's 2016, covering high school football at Watch Fox. It's dumb. It's dumb.
You don't like it?
And here's the reason. Oh, here's the reason why. Back in the day, and you get the history lesson when you talk to the great Rick Henry over at WIS.
Sure.
It made sense. It made sense. But now it feels like every team, for the most part, is playing week 0. So there's a lot of things in life that get changed over time, right? You know,
right.
You adapt. You adapt. As a human race, we adapt. I'm hoping that one day my kids and their kids will be able to see week 0 not be a thing, and it'll just be called week 1, so that people like me that have the mind of a goldfish don't get confused come week 5, week 6, and you're trying to figure out, wait, is it actually week 5 or is it week 6 because of that freaking week 0 that should be week 1? So I've always been this way.
Okay, that's fair. So you're not going to watch Florida State and Georgia Tech in Dublin?
Oh, you're talking about college football.
Yeah. That's what I'm. What do you think of it?
I'm talking high school football.
Oh,
See, I'm so programmed.
College football.
Well, I'm so programmed to get upset about the high school football. Having said all that,
I didn't know you had scathing hot takes about high school football.
Well,
because I was like, you said in the state. I'm like, I don't know why that's specific.
Well, I still have PTSD of trying to figure out which week it was.
I know what you're talking about. We were just talking about high school football in the break there, to where you'll have some teams that start, I don't know, August 24th, and some teams that start August 17th. And it's like, okay, well, this isn't a scrimmage, but the other 3 schools in the county are playing scrimmages. How does this add up? I don't know how they do it either. That's not my job.
So I just went on my rant about that, how I hate week 0 for high school. Yeah, I love the idea for college.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah, because there's only a couple teams playing.
And like Wes is very anti-week 0, which I think is funny. I like to bother him about that, but I'm like, it's just a handful of games.
No, I mean, honestly, for something like that, and again, I know it sounds like I'm being a hypocrite because I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. For something like that, it makes sense when it's only a couple teams playing.
Sure.
You know, but do you get my point? Like with high school now,
it is confusing.
Everyone's playing.
Right.
College, there's only a couple teams. I get that.
I understand that from the high school standpoint. Now that I understand what you meant, I get that. But week 0 of college football, we get the marquee-ish game of Florida State and Georgia Tech. You get Delaware State at Hawaii. That should kick off at like 1 a.m. probably. Montana State, New Mexico, and then SMU, an ACC team, by the way, going on the road to Nevada.
So weird.
That's
going to take some time for a lot of these changes in conferences, like UCLA and the Big Ten. Like
when they put out the release of the SEC ACC challenge in basketball this year, and had California on there, it took me a minute. I was like, oh, that's right, they're in the ACC now.
Yeah, it's going to take some time. There's going to be some. I mean, look, I was out the other night, and I was talking to a gentleman that was next to me. We were watching, I think, a hockey game or a basketball game. And we started talking that, okay, once the Stanley Cup wraps up, once the NBA Finals wraps up, unless you're a diehard WNBA fan or, whatever else is going on, baseball to me, it will start to pick up once you get into late July, August.
The second half of the season after the All-Star break.
Yep.
Things start to matter a little bit more.
So at that point, I'm itching for football.
Sure.
I'm itching. So CFL comes on, I'll watch that. I'll watch that. So the fact that we get college football just a week earlier, it doesn't even matter who the heck it is. I'm going to be excited about it. But that Florida State, I'm interested to see what Florida State can do this year, because certainly what they did last season, and I know there's some Gamecock fans that could care less about the ACC as a whole, but at the same time, too, don't forget, I mean, they're trying to keep Clemson out of the ACC championship game.
Sure.
So NC State certainly in that mix. I'm just interested to see what Florida State can do this year.
I am too. DJU making his return to the ACC, and I know his numbers at Oregon State were similar to what he had at Clemson, but the eye test alone, he has improved tremendously as a quarterback after leaving Clemson. Mm-hmm. So how does he do coming back into the conference with new teams in there, with Clemson being where they are right now? It's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. And again, we get them in week 0 as they take on Georgia Tech over there in Dublin. I want to pick back up on what we were talking about before the break there, because you mentioned somebody for South Carolina in Desmond Umeozulu, sorry, that came in last year with a fair amount of hype, 4-star kid at an edge spot that had a lot of questions going into last year. He was on the field, didn't really pop. I mean, really nobody at the edge spot popped a whole lot last year. Straughn had a couple sacks, but nothing really to write home about. And it's so funny how people just immediately push him to the side. All right, well, he didn't do it in year number 1. What's the use of him now? Let's focus on Dylan Stewart, which Dylan Stewart is turning a lot of heads. There's a lot of hype about him going into the season, but it's really funny how people can just so quickly move on from somebody if they don't show up in year number 1. It's called development. You got to give these guys time to develop, to get up to their full strength of what they're going to be in college. And we could be in for a good year of DJU or Desmond U. We don't know yet.
And it's not apples to apples, but this is what drove me crazy last year. I'm surprised I didn't pull every piece of hair out of my head when it was like, wait a minute, why isn't Nick Harbor playing more? He's a 5-star. He's a 5-star. Why isn't he out there? Just like, first off, he was learning a new position. That's why it's not apples to apples in this comparison.
Sure.
But the other part of it is this isn't a video game. Yeah. Are there going to be outliers where there'll be some players that come in and play right away? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can look at this team over the last couple of years. DQ Smith saw a lot of playing time as a freshman. That's why he was a freshman All-American. Nick Eamon-Worry, same thing. Jalen Kilgore last year. So, I mean, it happens. But it's not going to be the case with every single player, and there's multiple reasons why. I mean, you look at the offensive line last year.
Sure.
Luatos and Babalade, Javon Baugh, they both had to play, and they both had to start multiple games because of injuries. So I think when you look at Desmond's case, the fact is when he got here last spring, Sterling Lucas was raving about him. He did some good things this spring, too. He's put some more muscle on. And I think more than anything, again, when you look at what that defense could look like this year and how they're going to try to balance a 4-2-5 mixed in with a 3-3-5 look, what they do with that edge / outside linebacker / whatever the heck you want to call it, it could look very interchangeable. And we could have a guy like Desmond U playing like an outside linebacker role.
Sure.
Just because of the skill set and how similar those positions can be depending on the schematics of what the defense is trying to accomplish.
I like to call what people do with somebody like Desu with what people did with Harbor a season ago. If Dylan Stewart doesn't have a sack in the first 3 games, I call it shiny object syndrome, where when people look at that star rating next to somebody's names, and we'll get into a conversation about this, and the next hour on the opposite end with 3-star guys that people are freaking out about, that people look at somebody with a 4 or 5-star next to their name like, oh, he should come in and automatically be amazing. And if they're not that in half a season, well, that guy's a bust. Well, that guy wasn't worth picking up, whatever it may be. And it's so funny how people quickly try and make those assumptions when it's like, this guy's going to be here for hopefully another 3 years. Mm-hmm. Don't write him off, halfway through his freshman year.
Especially when you look at what Sterling Lucas has been able to do from a development standpoint. I mean, we talk so much about what he's done as a recruiter, and he's certainly one of the best recruiters that South Carolina has on staff. But you look at the development part of what he's been able to do. You look at the development part in the back end with what Torian Gray's been able to do. These coaches have been able to get the most out of a lot of these players. Now, that's not to say that things are perfect, all right? Certainly there's areas where a guy like DQ Smith or a Nick Eamon-Worry could have done a little bit better last year, and we've had opportunities to talk to them in the spring. And that's not to say they had bad years, but naturally when you have the type of season you had as a freshman, the bar is going to go up. And they'd be the first ones to tell you to say, hey, you know what? We could have done a little bit more last year. And it wasn't just on them. There was multiple issues last year with the defense, consistency being the biggest part of it all, not being able to finish plays. I think of, and I've mentioned this multiple times on our Gamecock Central show, so I'm sorry to give people PTSD. I think of that Florida play in particular, 4th down. You have a blitz coming off the outside. What is the responsibility of the defender at that point? Keep the quarterback inside the pocket. Quarterback gets outside, breakdown. So just little things like that. So I say that because I think when you look at it that way, it's easy to forget that there has been development, especially at the defensive back position, but there's also been development at the edge room. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of it this year because, Sterling's had an opportunity to work with some of these younger players, and you add in the fact that you're bringing in some of those talented transfers, starting with Kennard. I think we're going to see a lot of production in that room this year.
Absolutely. We'll hit our Firehouse Sub text of the hour as we wrap up hour number 1. It is the halftime show. He is Mike Yuba from Gamecock Central. Tyler Head along with you on your Thursday here on the game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Uva on your Thursday. It is time for our Firehouse Subs text of the hour, 803-404-6100. This goes back to our conversation at the beginning of the hour. We were talking about how tough everybody's schedule is in the SEC. Michael weighs in and says, at least South Carolina never has to argue whether they should be in the playoff or not. We'll always have the resume in the SEC, and I think that goes without saying. Now, there is going to be a line in the sand one day, or we're going to see it this year with the new playoff, of how many losses you can have and still get in. I think 10-2 in the SEC is a pretty safe bet for still being in. 9-3, you're probably walking that line. That kind of depends on what's happening around you too.
I can see it. I can see it, and I hear what you're saying. I think it depends on what's going on with other teams across the country. I look at what we saw this past season in baseball, and whether they should have been in or not, you look at a team like Florida, and they make the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know one of the reasons why they made it into the tournament. It's because they play the toughest schedule in the country.
Sure.
So I certainly think if any conference, especially, again, with the additions of Oklahoma and Texas, if any conference will get the benefit of the doubt, it will be the SEC, simply because you look at it from a blind resume standpoint. You look at two teams, most likely the team from the SEC is going to have the tougher schedule.
Sure. No, absolutely. And it always gets into that. And I'm so intrigued by this 12-team playoff, right? Like, is it the best way to decide a champion? Probably not. Is it going to be interesting and entertaining? Absolutely. And the debate, yes, you're not going to leave out an undefeated Florida State anymore. That'll never happen again. But the debate of technically who's 11, because the group of 5 gets the 12th spot no matter where they're ranked. But who's going to be 11, who's going to be that 12th team or 13th team that gets left out, and what those resumes are is going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds. And we get into that whole best versus most deserving thing that I think we get into every single year. And the committees obviously change a lot, so that criteria changes where what you do one year doesn't necessarily correlate with what you do the next year. So I imagine we're still going to have a share of controversy, just maybe not quite in the same way of what we saw this past year.
I was all for an expansion in the college football playoff, whether that be 6 teams, whether it be 8 teams. They settled on 12. More doesn't necessarily mean there's not going to be any headaches, as you alluded to, because look at the college basketball tournament, right? 64, 68 teams now. How many times every year does it get brought up, man, that 69th, 70th team, whatever the case may be, oh, they should have gone in.
Sure.
So whether they stay at 12, whether they move to 16, I hope they don't. But I feel like it's inevitable because at the end of the day, money talks.
It does.
So we will see the 13th team, the 14th team. They'll be bummed. They'll be bummed. And I know it sounds silly to say now, just saying it out loud, that one of those teams could have 4 losses, for crying out loud. But that will happen at some point. It will. The interesting part of this all is how I'm interested to see how fans react to losses in the regular season now in comparison to what it used to be. Because I'm not saying that you lose a game, you should be like, oh, everything's all right. And I think that's one of the things that made and makes college football and has made college football so unique in comparison to the NFL is that every week truly matters. Mm-hmm. You lose a game early in the season. I mean, you think back to when App State beat Michigan so many years ago. Their season was basically done at that point outside of playing for a conference title.
Right.
So now it gives teams a chance to make up some ground if they lose a game or two early in the year. Do I hate that? I don't hate it completely because teams get better as the year goes on.
Sure.
But I also don't want it to get to a point where we're putting so many teams in the playoff that we have 3 or 4 lost teams, and it's not basketball, it's not baseball.
Sure.
You are going to know who the 4 best teams are, who the 6 best teams are, if that is the case in said year.
Right, and it's kind of one of those things I want to experience it first before I make a true judgment on what I think it's going to be, because, you know, while, yes, the wins and the losses don't hurt as bad because it used to be has to be either perfect or have one loss to a good team to have any shot at winning the national championship. But I think about the month of November in college football now, where, you know, in the years of the college football playoff with 4 teams, there were anywhere between, I don't know, 8 to maybe 10 teams in a good year that you said, okay, they're still in the mix in November of making it to the college football playoff. We could be talking about 20 some odd teams, and winning a conference gets you locked in automatically now as well. So that opens up a whole other side of this, that if you're still in contention for your conference, you still got a chance to. We could go into the month of November with 30 teams still thinking they have a shot at the 12 spots in the college football playoff.
You know what it reminds me of? Even though it's the complete opposite when we talk about number of games, you look at what's going on in Major League Baseball. I mean, the wild card, think about it. At this time of the year, if this was 20-something years ago, how many teams really had a chance to be in the wild card?
Right.
You know, I mean, there were so many teams that were already eliminated.
Sure.
Now you're looking at it, there's 3 wild card spots. And I'm sure there's some people out there that aren't crazy about the expansion of that. I understand.
Right.
If you have a team that is, I don't know, say the Red Sox right now, I mean, they're clinging. They're clinging on to that. But it gives fans hope. And it's not like the season's done.
I mean, the Phillies have been running roughshod through the NL East. Braves are still in the best wild card position right now. So despite not having the best season, it's like, oh, you're still 5 games up in the wild card. So you're still in if it started today.
So, look, that obviously completely different. We're talking about the number of games because baseball plays over, it's 162 games. And we're talking college football that plays 12. So different, but at the same time similar in the sense that it makes the season, it will make the season interesting a little bit longer for fan bases.
Hour number 2 coming up. Want to get into a good article you had the other day on Gamecock Central about people's fixation and negative connotations around 3-star commitments for South Carolina.
I'm going to get worked up about this one.
We're going to let Uva rant in the next hour. That's coming up. It's the halftime show. He's Mike Uva from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game. 1 o'clock hour, football, and more football here on the halftime show. Tyler Head and Mike Yuva hanging out here on a Thursday, and we're going to get Yuva riled up, and we're going to let him rant. Great article the other day on Gamecock Central, because I see this too. When you look at this 2025 class that's coming together, a lot of 3-stars, and we get so hung up on star ratings for players because, theoretically speaking, a 5-star player means that you are expected to be somebody that in 3 to 4 years is good enough to go first round the NFL draft and descending down based on your star rankings. But there's so many factors and so many things that go into star ratings. It's an imperfect system. We've seen Hall of Famers in the NFL that were no stars, guys that went to colleges because they didn't have any star ratings. You know what I mean? Like, it's an imperfect thing, but we still spend so much time getting worked up, and sometimes rightfully so, about what a guy's rating is coming out of high school and what that means for your program going forward.
I don't want to say the star system doesn't mean anything, because certainly there's something that comes from it. Like, you have an idea. Like, you look at some of the top teams in the country over the last couple of years. Yeah, we're talking about 5 stars, 4 stars, the number of those players that they were able to recruit. Yes, there's certainly something to be said, but there's much more that goes into it than just, okay, this is how many 5 stars they had. This is how many 4 stars they had. Think about when you look at the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the 4 stars that they were able to land, not all those players, especially now, even finish their careers at those schools.
Sure.
Never mind the fact of how many of those players don't pan out to be as good. It gets overlooked because they just have so many of those type of players. So to say, I'm not going to say that star rankings don't mean anything, especially when we're talking about South Carolina, because it's kind of loser talk if I say it like that.
Right.
However, I also think at this time of the year, and this was the whole premise of the story that I put out on Gamecock Central, people getting so worked up on the number of 3 stars. The number of 3 stars that South Carolina is landing right now, it's like, my goodness. All right? I think I put the story out 2 days ago. So I said my exact quote, I think someone copied it and put it on the message board. They said this was my favorite line. I said, it's freaking June 18th. Okay, so now it's freaking June 20th. So the point being is things are going to change over the next couple months. We have seen this over the last couple years. Where you see numbers change for some of these prospects. 2 great examples, because it was the same spiel last year where people were getting all upset around the time when Fred Johnson committed to South Carolina. Matthew Fuller, both players were 3 stars at the time. And I just remember the same thing, people getting all worked up. Oh, great, another 3-star. Here we go. This is great. Guess what? Fred Johnson, he moved up to being a 4-star. And not only that, finished being ranked 15th in the country at linebacker. Matthew Fuller was a 3-star, moves up to 4-star, 13th running back in his class. So the point being is this. Is that always going to be the case? Certainly not. Certainly not. I understand that. And I'm not going to give you the whole, well, Connor Shaw was a 3-star. You've heard that. And I know it's a broken record, because for every 3-star, for every story of Connor Shaw, obviously there's a bunch of others that don't pan out that way. But you know what? There's stories of guys that were 5 stars. There were stories of guys that were 4 stars, and they didn't live up and produce that level of type of talent once they got to the college game. So, again, not saying that it's not nice when you can land some 5 stars, which, oh, by the way, South Carolina is coming off a recruiting class from a year ago in which they landed 2 5 stars for the first time in program history. So it's like, let's not just forget that. Like, they're not bringing in talented guys. They're going through a process of finding guys that can fit the system. And if you look at a lot of these players right now, some of these guys will move up to being 4 stars when it's all said and done. But more importantly, I think a lot of these players are fitting into the system, especially defensively, what they're trying to accomplish with that 3-3-5 and obviously playing a little 4-2-5 as well.
Well, and you mentioned Fred Johnson, and he was somebody, J.R. Johnson, whatever we're calling him now, but he was somebody that, hadn't really gotten a lot of exposure before South Carolina made the offer to him. He was in camp a season ago, really popped. They liked what they saw out of him. They made him the offer, and obviously he ended up committing to South Carolina. And then it was after the fact is when more schools and more people around the country became aware of him, and you saw that star rating eventually end up, elevating. So it can be one of those things. You might get in a little bit earlier on somebody before they've had a true chance to live up to their full star potential at the high school level so far. And again, those things can change between now and when they end up signing with South Carolina. But, it's just an interesting thing to sit back and watch how people's react to those kind of things. I mentioned the shiny object syndrome when it comes to the 4- and 5-star guys. Like, man, you better come in here and immediately make an impact. It's almost like people could care less, not care less, but don't pay as much attention to what happens with the 3-star guys. When you can see guys that come in as 3 stars, be developed, and go on and be 1st or 2nd round picks in the NFL draft or whatever it be. Like, we don't talk about that nearly as much, but that's a shining example of how good your program can be if you can bring in those mid-level talents, quote unquote, and develop them to be on the better end of college football players.
And another part too that I didn't add into that story, but I mentioned today on Gamecock Central in my weekly Thursday piece called Quick Slants. Maybe it's just this new era that we're living in where I don't get so, especially at this time of the year, I don't get so caught up with the high school recruiting, which I know that sounds crazy. It's like you're working for a recruiting site. I'm sure Brian Shoemaker loves me saying that.
Right.
But what I'm trying to get at with that is with the transfer portal, South Carolina this past cycle, they have proven that you can flip a lot of rooms. And improve on positional groups like linebacker, running back, for example. They finished 10th this past year when it came to transfer portal players. Okay, so yes, they're sitting, I think it's 25th today, which is like 6 spots down from where they finished last year. So I get it when we're talking about the high school recruiting rankings. But at the same time, too, I think it's not what it used to be. Sure. Because now you have the transfer portal. And I'm not saying you just do that, you're going to be okay. Certainly if you can be able to develop your own players, I think there's something to be said about that. But I don't think it's the end of the road when you look at something and say, all right, that's going to tell the whole story. No, it's that plus now what you have to do in the transfer portal.
Yeah, no. Absolutely, and that's in a similar way. You see that with the transfer portal too. When we bring in commitments of guys from mid-major programs or FCS or Division II or something like that, people are very quick to write those kind of guys off as well, saying, "Well, they didn't play in the SEC." And I do get that. That's a fair question to ask, but there is something to be said about experience in college football. And if you've played for 3 or 4 years, I don't care where you played at, you are a college football player. You've gone up against good programs. You've gone up against good talent that, in a lot of times, does end up translating to the next level. Juice Wells was at James Madison when they were in FCS school.
Yep.
Transferred here, became a pretty darn good player. Obviously, wish he was still here. He's at Ole Miss now, but still, that's an example of somebody that can come in. Mario Anderson a season ago from Division II, and we asked the question, rightfully so, can this guy translate to the SEC? And yes, you had the offensive line problems, but he still ended up doing pretty okay for given the circumstances around him. So it even kind of goes back to the transfer portal guys too, where despite the fact that it's not star rankings, people automatically look like, well, where'd you come from? And to a degree, what was your star rating out of high school? And try to make those assumptions of what that's going to mean for them coming here.
And since we're talking about 3 stars, in a recent interview that Jalen Kilgore gave, he was talking about players who have been really standing out to him on both sides of the ball. Talked about Mazeo Bennett on the offensive side, which I don't think is going to surprise a lot of people, right?
No, that's a name we've heard quite a bit.
Defensively, he's like, all right, aside from Dylan Storp, because that's like a cheat code when you're talking about him.
Sure.
A player he mentioned was 3-star safety David Busey. Now, does that mean Busey's going to come in here and he's going to start? No, not right now, because you look at the talent in that safety room. But the point being is, here's a guy that's coming in and he's making a big impact. And I think a lot of people overlooked him.
Sure.
Shane Beamer mentioned going all the way back to signing day last December that was a player, I think him along with Michael Smith, the tight end, were 2 players that he felt weren't getting enough hype. They were being overlooked. So I bring that up because players are starting to recognize the talents around them. We don't get to see some of it, especially this early, because some of these guys have only been here for a couple months and they went through spring ball. But some of these guys are coming in and they're already making an impact, even though they only have, 3 stars, whatever the case may be. So,
right.
Again, I don't want it to come across like, oh, Mike's saying that you can win with a bunch of 3 stars. Okay, now granted, coaches don't look at it from a star system. They're not saying, okay, now from a recruiting standpoint, when they sell their program, if they finish in the top 15, top 10, of course they're going to come out and say that. Of course, last year when Beamer mentioned that they landed 2 5-stars for the first time in program history, of course they're going to use that.
It's almost kind of like when you're, dating or whatever, trying to find girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it may be, it's that attractiveness that initially draws you to them, right? So that star rating is the initial thing that will garner your attention. But when you look at their mechanics, how they play the position, you know, what they do on a, you know, an individual basis, that's what really
I can
kind
make
of
so many jokes right now. I don't know if my girlfriend Brooke's listening, like the mechanics. Oh, yeah, she makes a mean breakfast omelet, you know, folds those clothes great. Yeah, I'm trying everything I can not to get slapped, but you were really setting it up there.
I was going to say, what do you think?
I mopped the floor, by the way. Just want to throw that out there.
What do you think her star rating for you is, by the way?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Probably a 2-star with potential, you know. First guy in, last guy out mentality.
Real hard worker, student of the game, all that kind of stuff. But in the same kind of way, it's that star rating that initially attracts you to the player, but then you get a deeper understanding and figure out what they really are, and that's where things progress from there.
Yeah, and I think, too, when we look at what this staff did last year from a recruiting standpoint and some of the players that, or excuse me, 2 recruiting cycles ago, they've done a really nice job of being able to answer some of the question marks they've had. Now, that doesn't mean everything's perfect, but you look at the offensive line, which certainly over the last couple of years, even going towards the end of the Will Muschamp era, that's been a big issue, big question mark. The injuries, you can't avoid that. That's going to happen. But I think what they've been able to do, saw it last year, right? We mentioned it before.
Right.
Big Tree comes in, Bach comes in. They did a really nice job last year. Really good job. You think on the defensive line and the pieces that they've been able to add over the last couple of years, certainly when you talk about Dylan Stewart, but even talking about a guy like Desmond Umeozulu, this from last year's recruiting cycle. Like, they've done some nice things at multiple spots. We can go back in the secondary. It goes without saying. But again, that's not to say everything's perfect, but I think those things get overlooked so much simply because it's like, all right, that's last year. What's happening now? It's like these guys aren't just going to come in and make an impact right away. There's going to be outliers like we mentioned, but some of these guys, it's going to go back to the part that you mentioned, the development part of it.
We'll continue this conversation. Got some of you hanging on the Lev Chevrolet phone lines. We'll get to you coming up next. It is the halftime show. He's Mike Yuba from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Thursday on the game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler and Mike Yuva along with you here on this Thursday. Want to continue this conversation we were just having in the last segment there about Mike's story on Gamecock Central revolving around three-star players and the apathy that people do kind of have when they see those star ratings. I got a caller on the line now, Jay, who says he's a coach and wants to give a little bit of perspective on his thoughts on players and their star rankings. Jay, appreciate your time. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I really do appreciate you guys taking my call. I happen to be down here for a Board of Governors meetings with the Alumni Association. Just heard you guys for the first time. Really enjoying your show. So I coach high school ball. This is my 25th year. I also spent a couple of years working with UltimateRecruit.com, which evaluated southeastern and to interior of Virginia. Recruit rankings revolve a lot around getting kids at camps, and then those that handle the recruit rankings communicating with each other so that most people are on the same page. Something that's new, we've had about a total of 61 kids that I've coached have gone to play college ball. None of them have had a star rating. And something that we're finding new for the first time at some of the mega camps that are being advertised as for-profit camps are organizations coming around and tying star rankings to NIL offers and attempting to sign high school parents. So saying, if you go with our organization, we'll help you get your son recruited, and also we'll make sure if he hits a 3-star rating, he gets this NIL deal. If he hits a 4-star rating, he gets that NIL deal. And talking with Coach Elliott and Coach Tinsley especially, because I coach offensive line guys and tight ends, a lot of these kids are getting a false hope and a false narrative from grown adults selling them as high school sophomores and juniors on the idea of getting a massive NIL contract. And then what's happening is these kids are falling in love with the recruiting process instead of falling in love with the school or with the coaches. And that's the kids that end up, when these 4- and 5-star kids hop in the portal and they're transferring every 3 or 4 years, it's because they miss when they were treated like kings on these recruiting visits, and they don't realize when they hop into a school what it takes. You know, what South Carolina's trying to build right now, and it may take a couple of years to get there, and Gamecock fans have just got to be patient, is the program that they're trying to build is built around guys that want to be here and want to play for the University of South Carolina and want what the university offers first, fit the system second, and then have the ability and the wherewithal to stick with it and to work through hard times. If you show up at a school and it's easy for you from day one until you graduate, you went to the wrong school. And that's what we're trying to impress upon young people today. And I appreciate you guys taking my time. It irritates, I'm kind of like you guys, it irritates me to death when I hear casual fans on Twitter or whatever screaming about, oh, we're only signing 3-star guys. I would take a 3-star that's in love with the university and willing to work his butt off to be a part of this football team, hands down, over a 5-star that's just here to be recruited, collect offers, collect NIL deals.
Well, Jay, certainly appreciate your call. That's really good insight and perspective that you can offer there. And one thing, he talked about it at the very beginning there, the visibility is really big. And I go back to what we said about, J.R. Johnson, where he just hadn't really been seen by a whole lot of places prior to getting to South Carolina. He saw the Camp Pier last summer, whenever it was, as the opportunity to get more exposure. It ended up happening. And again, South Carolina was able to jump on him before anybody else, get him, give him an offer. He was able to commit to them. And again, they've been able to hang on to him to where he's now a part of the team. So sometimes you just may not have the resources or avenues, depending on what school you're at, to be able to be seen where people are going to talk about you in the same way as some of those high caliber talents that have that same or have higher exposure. Yeah,
and I feel like, one place in particular that happens to a lot, being from there, Massachusetts. I mean, there was a player on my dad's team that playing, Division I's the highest level up in Massachusetts. You're playing Division I, but you're not getting the same type of eyeballs across the country. What happens? He goes down, transfers to IMG Academy for a year before coming back.
That'll do it.
And then next thing you know, bunch of schools are coming after him.
Sure.
And I remember Will Muschamp was up there recruiting him when he, for Georgia. Now he's playing defensive back at Georgia. So I bring that up because there's no question that where you are can help from an exposure standpoint. The coaches, there's some of these coaches, when I went down and I was working in Greenville, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Some of these coaches are involved with a lot of these camps, these showcases, and it can certainly help players as well. That's not to take anything away from the players who do earn high rankings, because there's some of them that, God bless them, they don't come from much. They don't have anything, and they have to do so much, and they're able to get that ranking. It means a lot to them, and they should be proud of that.
Sure.
But there's also the other side of it, which is, there's players out there that will get a ranking because where they are playing at, or who their coach is, or what showcase that they were at. But I think another thing that he brought up was interesting. You're seeing in some of these states where they're approving NIL for high school. Mm. And I know this is going to be another totally different component of when we're talking about the ranking system. You're not going to be able to fully grasp the mindset of some of these players coming out of high school as far as what's important to them. And not saying that you can fully do it now,
right,
but it's going to be different. I mean, we see it in the NFL already. I was listening to an interview with Drake May, and they were talking about all these endorsements. Okay, you're up here in New England now. He's like, I had to deal with that at North Carolina.
Right.
So, some of these players are used to different things. We've seen it with the WNBA. Some of these players going to the next level. They're used to that. High school kids are coming up now. How does that change things? Because you're going to look at a player, he's a 5-star or 4-star, but now he could be coming from a situation where he was making some money. And I'm not saying making millions. I mean, obviously, that will be an outlier in most cases, but what's the priority for him?
Yeah. Well, and as he mentioned there are some maybe ulterior motives to how some of these guys get these star rankings. But if you come into a place as a 5-star, guess what? You're going to have a higher NIL earning potential
Absolutely.
than somebody that comes in as a 3-star. So there's a lot of politicking in sports in general, but especially when it comes to high school recruiting. So to kind of sum all this up, and I get it, if you sign a team full of 5-stars, you're probably going to be very successful. If you only sign a team of 2 and 3 stars, you're going to have a tougher time just kind of based on the law of averages there. But again, getting back to the main point, just because somebody is a 3-star doesn't mean they can't develop into being one of the best players on your team in the country, whatever it may be. It's just you have to have the right coaching staff that can bring them in and develop them and get them to the point of continuing to improve as a player.
And you got to be able to keep them too, right? You got to be able to keep them. That's the other part of it all.
And that's the unfortunate part of the reality of college football now. Say, man, that guy came in as a 3-star, had 2 great seasons with us. Oh, he's in the transfer portal.
He's gone.
Yep. So you got to be able to retain them as well. And that does go back to NIL and this whole mess that we're having to deal with on a year in, year out basis now.
Yeah, and that's why I don't blame some of these coaches for saying, you know what, I'm just going to go to the NFL. God bless them. God bless these college coaches because, yes, I understand they make a lot of money, especially the head coaches. But, goodness, the added popsicle headaches that you have to deal with now in college sports.
You know, college coaches get compensated very well for their jobs, but I don't know how they have time for anything outside of football.
No.
I'm like, when do you see your family?
What family?
When you see your kids?
What family?
Yeah, when do you go on vacation?
Yeah, I'll send them a birthday card.
Yeah, like I don't know. Again, more power to them. Glad it's not me. They make the money. They deserve it. Because that is a rough life.
Yeah, it's tough for sure.
We'll continue the football conversation. Chris Doering of the SEC Network going to join us on the other side. See what he's been up to this offseason. Look ahead to the 2024 college football season. It is the halftime show. He's Mike Yuba. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game. Welcome back in. It's the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuva hanging out with you here on your Thursday, 72 days away from South Carolina kicking off its season against Old Dominion on August 31st as we navigate through the dog days of summer. Here to chat a little bit of college football from the SEC Network is Chris Doering. Chris, first of all, appreciate a little bit of your time this afternoon. How do you spend the college football offseason and getting eventually ramped up for the season to begin once again?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know or not, but my schedule during the season is kind of busy. I leave every Thursday night from Gainesville to fly up to Charlotte, fly back every Monday. So only 3 nights at home a week during, that 3 nights. So I always look forward to the travel all over New York earlier this week. I'm in Miami right now. I don't have anything to really expand the battery, but I'm hoping it's Allison and well.
Chris, I'll tell you what I'm disappointed in. I know you juggle another job. I'm disappointed that you haven't come to the rescue, and I know they just got eliminated, but you didn't come to the rescue for Florida in the Jello Shot Challenge. I was very disappointed to see the number that they put up. I thought they were going to be better.
Well, first and foremost, I'm very embarrassed for my alma mater that sports it was. It's a reflection on 2 things. I guess you spin it, maybe, try to paint it in the best possible light. The embarrassing part, one, is that we don't travel very well out to Omaha. As passionate as this conference is about baseball, for Florida to not have a better representation in Omaha is embarrassing. And here I speak a little bit out of both sides of my mouth because I've never been to Omaha. Florida's been to 9 of the last 14 College World Series, and yet I haven't made it even though it's on my bucket list. So I guess I'm to blame for that. But, yeah, the Jello shot thing is something that is right up our alley, I guess. I mean, maybe the way we spend it is that, if we're going to go to the bar, we're going to do tequila shots and not pretend candy cigarette shots. But other than that, I don't know if there's any way that I can paint it any less embarrassing than what it was.
Now, let's say you were out there for an entire week. How many Jello shots do you think you could contribute to that board yourself?
Well, I proposed this to the manager of Rocco's. We had him on the show a week or so ago, and I actually think there should be some sort of consumption police, some requirement, not just to buy them and throw them away, but you actually have to imbibe. I don't know if you can imbibe Jello shots, chew up the Jello shots, whatever it is. I think you should have to consume the Jello shots for them to be able to count towards your total.
It's kind of like the hot dog contest where they make.
I don't want to avoid the question. For a whole week, though, I think I'm probably good. I think I could probably knock down 20 a day. So, if I'm there for 10 days, if Florida goes all the way, 200 Jello shots I could probably contribute.
That's a pretty solid contribution. I like your idea, though. It's like the hot dog contest where they make sure you eat the dog and the bun before they flip the number over.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a fair point.
Exactly. Yeah, I think if all these guys want to throw their credit card down, you want to impress me, actually do those shots that you're buying.
Talking to Chris Doering of the SEC Network. Again, football season only a couple of months away. We've talked so much about the change in college football. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma coming in to the conference. The SEC is already looked at as the toughest league in all of football. How much tougher does it get just adding those 2 teams in, as well as eliminating divisions, kind of creating this mismatch of schedules across the board?
Yeah, I think when the news came out, what was that? We were at Media Days 2 or 3 years ago. I don't even remember at this point. But when the rumors started swirling about Texas and Oklahoma coming, it was exciting. It was exciting because of the brand and what those 2 historic programs mean to college football. But I think both programs were a ways away from looking like they were SEC ready. I think at the time I said, hey, you drop those 2 teams in the league and they're probably middle of the pack. Fast forward to the beginning of last season when Texas goes into Tuscaloosa and absolutely beats up the Tide at home, something that never happens, and owned them on both lines of scrimmage, looked faster. It was a remarkable illustration of how far Texas had come. And I think if you look at Oklahoma, too, Brent Venables did a lot in his second year to upgrade the lines of scrimmage, something we all know is important when you're playing in the SEC. So I do think these teams are much better than maybe they were, a couple years ago when the announcement came out. I do also think there'll be more of an acclimation kind of period than most people think. The grind of playing an SEC schedule is something I've talked about dating back to my days playing in the league in the 90s, and certainly it's gotten even more physical and even more challenging with the addition of Texas A&M and Missouri, and now with Texas and Oklahoma. But I really believe that it's not only the physical impact, the physical cumulative buildup that you get, but also the emotional draining aspect of having to play the SEC schedule and getting your emotions up every single week for challenges that you play within this conference. So it's going to be an incredibly difficult 16-team league, especially with the elimination of the divisions and what that's going to do and changing up the scheduling. But, I don't know. You win an SEC championship now, you've really been able to do something between the level of competition and having to be one of the top two teams instead of being, the division winner that you've had to be since 1992.
Chris, we were talking about this before, that with the expansion of the college football playoff, combine that with the fact that, like you said, there's no divisions anymore. There's just 16 teams in the conference. Certainly you're going to see a number of teams who have multiple losses make the college football playoff. From an SEC standpoint, and I don't know if it's the exact same, but we use the example of Florida with baseball. I mean, there was an argument as to whether or not they should make the NCAA tournament. They made the tournament, and one big reason why was because of the fact that they play in the toughest conference in baseball. From a football standpoint, how much of an impact can that have on the SEC when you add these two teams in there? And do you see a scenario where there could be some years where you have not just 2 or 3 teams from the SEC making the college football playoff, but potentially even 4?
Yeah, I mean, think about that. Like, we're about to crown the 5th different national champion from the SEC in college baseball coming up here over the weekend into Monday. And the same is true for college football. The run that the SEC had been on with so many different teams winning national championships speaks to the quality of football and the difficulty playing in this conference. I think reputation matters. Reputation matters when we're talking about the NCAA basketball tournament selection committee. I think it certainly matters, as we saw with Florida getting in and on Ole Miss winning a national championship a couple years ago with maybe them being the last team in the field. And I think it matters. The SEC has gotten the benefit of the doubt a couple times when it comes to including a non-SEC champion into the playoff field as an at-large team. It's going to continue to swing the biggest sword. I think the addition of Texas and Oklahoma is obviously a subtraction for the Big 12, and so I think it's going to be a very similar type situation to what we saw in Omaha, where the field every year is made up of primarily SEC and Big Ten teams, and it's going to be one of those two conferences that probably win more times than not.
And talking to Chris Doering from the SEC Network, looking at this from a South Carolina perspective, and in the 3 years under Shane Beamer, there have been a team that's kind of treaded water in that middle to lower end of the SEC. How much harder does that now make their, potential climb to the top of the conference, which is obviously the goal when Beamer was hired here, now that things get so much tougher across the board?
Yeah, South Carolina's always been in a tough spot, right? I mean, it's a tough school in terms of talent within the state. That back-to-back 11-win run that Coach Spurrier went on was largely due to having guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Alshon Jeffrey and Marcus Lattimore, Stephon Gilmore, all being South Carolina homegrown players that not only stayed within the state but went to Carolina instead of going to Clemson. So you have to have some unique times where there's a lot of talent that you're able to get to come from within the state. Shane Beamer's done a great job of making that program something that's become a little more national in terms of their recruiting reach. But I also think that Coach Beamer's a little bit of a victim of his own success. I think you saw the same thing with Sam Pittman in Arkansas. If you win too fast, too soon, the bar gets set a little too high. And I think the nature of them overachieving in his first 2 seasons made the fall in 2023 even more difficult to palate because of people's expectations. And hope is a very powerful emotion. And so I know that this time of year, hope springs eternal, and I'm hopeful that South Carolina program can bounce back. But it is inherently challenging playing in the SEC and having to deal with kind of what you've seen from a lot of different teams, with the inability to be consistent. I don't think you can really build a program anymore. It's all about hey, let's put a run together for a 1-year period, the way that we saw Ole Miss or Missouri come out of nowhere. I don't know if South Carolina can get to 11 wins this year, but I do think they'll be better. And I'm kind of excited about what the offense will look like with a very different kind of quarterback at the helm. With Spencer Rattler, I thought he was tremendous the last few years, but I think it's going to be exciting to see a little bit more run orientation with the quarterback involved going forward this season.
Yeah, let's go off from that. Talking about Lenore Sellers, different type of quarterback, different style. But the thing that stands out to me more than anything is the fact that this is his first opportunity, right? Outside of some garbage time last season, we really haven't seen him play. As a former wide receiver, Chris, what can the wide receivers do? And obviously there's a lot of new faces in that room. I mean, you have 50% of those players in that room on scholarship. They're new faces. So what can wide receivers do to help out a young quarterback, especially early on to start the season?
Yeah, there's a lot of time that's being spent right now behind the scenes where fans aren't aware of the work that's going in. Receivers and quarterbacks getting a lot of throws together this time of year. The quarterbacks organizing 7-on-7. I know there's a little bit more opportunity within the rules for coaches to be with the players than it used to be, but there's a lot of the onus that falls on guys doing things on their own time and with their own organization. So it is important that these guys are developing a little bit of a chemistry to make sure they're on the same page as they go forward. But, I think the biggest thing, I look at South Carolina, it's like, golly, let's just stay healthy, and I know there's not a lot you can do about that. And some people, point to the strength and conditioning program when it comes to injuries, but sometimes you just get a bad break. And last year was really challenging, as we all know, for South Carolina with the number of injuries they had at key positions particularly. But, with the silver lining, a lot of young guys that got an opportunity to play, and I think the program will benefit because of that experience that maybe came a little prematurely for some.
All right, good stuff, Chris. We appreciate your time once again. Continue to enjoy the off season. Can't wait to see you and the crew behind the desk when the fall rolls around.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you guys in Dallas here soon, man. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Again,
right,
Chris Doering from the SEC Network. Come back, wrap up hour number 2. Hit the Firehouse Up text of the hour. Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Tyler Head hanging out on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuva hanging out on your Thursday. Time for our Firehouse Subs text of the hour, 803-404-6100. This goes back to the conversation we're having a little bit earlier about the postseason and bowl games. Nameless texter weighs in and says, hear me out, cut the bowl games down and make all bowl games playoff games. Well, the unfortunate thing is, while that would make a lot of sense, there's so much money tied up in bowls and there's such a legacy with bowls. They're never going away. If we're trying to if we were starting college football from scratch right now, bowl games wouldn't be a thing. You just have the playoffs, and if you didn't make the playoffs, tough luck. Look forward to next season. But because bowls have been such a big thing in college football, we have to circumvent the playoffs around the bowls to where now you can play in the Rose Bowl on January 1st, and then like 9 days later play the Cotton Bowl to see if you can go to the national championship game. It doesn't make sense, but I get why they're doing it.
And while from a fan standpoint, maybe playing in the Pastrami Bowl doesn't excite you, whatever TikTok Tech Bowl there is out there, coaches will always want to have that opportunity to be able to get those 15 extra practices.
Oh, that's insanely valuable. And when you talk about, Carolina missing the bowl this past year, yeah, you would have loved to have gone to Jacksonville or Memphis or somewhere and played a team from the Big 12. But really, it's about that experience of getting those practices and being able to bring in your early signees as well, much like you had some guys the year before the Gator Bowl to get out there and have them in practice.
Get them at I know he's not here anymore, but
he was turning heads at that point in time like, man, this dude's looking good, just because it is an extra set of practices where you can bring those guys in, get a sense of what your team's going to be like next year, in addition to playing that game and, whatever swag bags they give out for the random bowl games now, and just having one more opportunity to play a game together as a team.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go the opposite way. And look, like I mentioned before, football's on. I'm going to turn on and watch it.
Right. I love bowl games. I will watch.
The beginning of bowl season might not be the sexiest matchups.
Sure.
But at the same time, too, it's football on TV.
It's funny how it kind of starts off as the background noise, where it's like, all right, I'm at home. Let me put on the New Mexico Bowl because it's a bowl game, and you'll pay attention and kind of go in and out. But as the weeks go by, then it's like, okay, I actually am going to pay attention to this one a little bit more. I'm aware of the teams that are playing and so on and so forth, and it kind of ramps up until you eventually get into the college football playoff bowls, which now we're going to have playoff games that aren't bowls the weekend before Christmas, which now moves bowl season up a week to Army-Navy weekend. So there's a lot going on.
I will say one thing that I am excited about, and I put this out a couple weeks ago when it came out. We have a Christmas Eve bowl game.
Yes.
I'm excited. When we have Christmas Eve bowl games, it doesn't always happen every year. I'm excited about that. I don't know why. I enjoy that. You're around the family. You talk about the background. You have that.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
And it's the Hawaii Bowl, which a lot of the times does fall on New Year's Eve, depending on how the calendar falls.
Well, it used to be the Popeyes Bowl. That was out in the Bahama Bowl.
It was the Popeyes Bahamas Bowl. I think that's, this past year they moved it to Charlotte because the Bahamas and Charlotte, totally the same place. That's going to be disappointing for the teams that were in that. But they would have that on New Year's Eve as well. But typically, I think the Hawaii Bowl is almost always on New Year's Eve. And funny thing about the Hawaii Bowl, so I was the kid that woke up like super early on Christmas morning to see like what Santa brought or whatever. I'm talking like 2, 3 in the morning. I would get up early, unwrap whatever presents I had, play with whatever, and I would always put on like ESPN in the middle of the night, just showing reruns anyway. So I probably didn't see the Hawaii Bowl from the night before, so I would watch like the rerun of the Hawaii Bowl at like 3 in the morning while playing with my Christmas presents because everybody else was still asleep. So I have fond memories of Christmas Eve bowl games for that exact reason.
Your Christmas experience are better than mine. I'm going to try to make sure I say this knowing that there could be some kids in the car. My parents recorded me videotaping Santa coming down the chimney.
Oh, no.
I was still in 6th grade. I'll leave it at that. So I got teased in middle school.
Did you have to destroy the video footage?
I think it might. We got to destroy it, but I'm trying my best right now because
say the government's going to come to your house for that.
I try to catch old Saint Nick. We had him on video.
You thought you were slick.
Oh, I thought I was slick.
Man.
Yep.
Well, everybody has different experiences, I guess.
Yeah, I still get teased from my buddies about that.
But, hey, bowls are the gifts that always give, right?
Yeah.
The gifts that keep on giving. It's just the weirdest part to me is, like, not next year. I think 2 years from now when the Rose Bowl is back in the semifinal rotation and it gets played on, like, January the 10th.
What's your thoughts on certain bowl games being like, all right, this should be the semifinals every year. I get what people are saying, but at the same time, too, there is something about the rotation. I mean, I understand the reason why it's happening is because of money. I mean, it comes down to money.
It is, and you're never going to get the other bowls to agree like, yeah, we'll always be a quarterfinal and make that one the semifinal. I get the rotation, and the Rose Bowl is the only one that has like the set time frame in your mind of 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific time. You know, the Rose Bowl parade happened earlier on in the day. Like, that's the only one that really kind of gets that kind of treatment of, oh, it belongs on this day. Because the Sugar Bowl's been on New Year's Eve. It's been on January the 3rd. It's moved around all kinds of places. So, like that bowl game and other ones don't quite have that.
And some of them are inside, too. Some of these are in domes, which I don't hate domes, but you're not going to get that same view.
You know, the Cotton Bowl isn't at the Cotton Bowl anymore. The Fiesta Bowl isn't at Sun Devil Stadium anymore. Like, and I mean, even the Peach Bowl, when it was at the Georgia Dome, had a certain nuance to it that I feel like Mercedes-Benz Stadium doesn't quite have. But like the Rose Bowl's the only one that kind of keeps that purity. But even that's going to be played in the middle of January now instead of January the 1st. Crazy.
Hey, bring on more football, though. We'll take it.
That's right. We'll hit the headlines of what's going on coming up at 2 o'clock as hour number 3 of the halftime show coming up. He is Mike Hugh from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. 2 o'clock hour. Tyler Head, Mike Yuba hanging out for today's edition of the halftime show. Time to hit what is trending at 2. And we talked about this a little bit earlier on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We have some news with the land development of South Carolina. All that land down there around Williams-Brice Stadium, the Congaree River. It was over a year ago when this first got put on the table, and people speculated, hey, they can do this, they can do that, and really haven't gotten a whole lot out of it since then. But this week, they have finally, make sure I get this right, been approved to, hold on. They have officially been approved to begin soliciting proposals on what can be built for the roughly 900 acres of land near the stadium and the river. So it's like, it's about a half step, but a very important half step.
I'm very excited. I don't know how long it's going to take until it's all up, but you think about the Battery out in Atlanta. They have a place similar near Gillette Stadium with Patriot Place. It brings in so much added revenue to the city in whatever area that you're in. And when we're talking about from a recruiting standpoint too, I mean, my goodness. I mean, this could be a game changer for sure. That's why they're calling it a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about, what the game day experience of Williams-Brice Stadium is in the surrounding area, tailgating, which is great, and you have that at every SEC school, but there are people that want to be entertained outside of that. They want more than the game. They want more than the tailgating. They want it to be a weekend experience. Like, hey, let's get in on Friday night. Let's go do something. Go to the game on Saturday. Stick around on Sunday. Go do something after that as well. That, yes, there are things in Columbia that you can do, but it's when you put it all in one place, that just makes it a full immersive experience in addition to making it something that is worthwhile going or worth going to outside of football season as well, because that is, another tourist attraction for the city itself.
Yeah, without giving like my address away, I'm someone that lives not too far from the football stadium. I'm heavily invested in this.
Sure.
Because I think certainly when you look at that area outside of the stadium, outside of the fairgrounds, I know there's some restaurants around. I'm not trying to take shots at them, but there's just not.
Shout out to Bojangles on Bluff Road.
Yeah, there's not as much. There used to be, a brewery right around the corner. That's gone, unfortunately. There's a restaurant in the corner across from the fairgrounds, but there's not as many restaurants and shops, and I think that it's something that if you add more to it, it's going to give people a reason to come out, not just for football games, not just for the state fair. And I feel like it will certainly help. I mean, you're seeing what's going on right now with the Bull Street project. I mean, my goodness, I got here in 2016 in the summer, and it looks night and day different. I mean, you look at what's gone on in that time period, but even going back to 2010 on just Main Street, right around the corner from here. I mean, a lot of different places in and around this area. It has definitely got a facelift, but I certainly feel like that is an area in particular that desperately needs one, and this would be incredible. I don't know what shops or restaurants you'd like to see.
I was going to say,
if you're picky.
The possibilities are kind of endless, because you not only need, restaurants and shops, you need like entertainment things to do as well. I mean, like axe throwing is something that has taken off in a lot of different places. Give axe throwing place. If you could put, I don't know, a Topgolf out there or something like that. Maybe that's a little bit too big and too ambitious.
Can I sound old and tell you what I want?
Sure, go ahead.
And I know it's going to probably upset some of the businesses that are around that area. You need a grocery store out there. Think how much of a game changer that can be on game day.
I was going to say,
you forget the sandwiches, the husband, the wife, they forgot something. All right, you go right there, boom, everything's taken care of.
I think that's something that does kind of get overlooked in those kind of things.
I mean, I don't know if that makes me. I mean, I know I'm getting older here, but I'm thinking, man, I'd really be celebrating the fact of a grocery store going up in that area.
Well, I mean, again,
you have Rosewood, you have grocery stores in the area, but I'm saying right there.
Yeah, I mean, again, you live in the area, that would be extremely beneficial to you.
Yeah, I'd love it.
But and look, people again have limited possibilities on what this could do, but when you have, and not every school in the SEC or around the country has the ability to do something like this. Again, I think about the University of Georgia. Sanford Stadium is plop in the middle of campus. You can't do anything around that. There's the Tate Center, there's buildings that it's just there. There's nothing you can do around that. But South Carolina really kind of has a blank canvas in a way. to really make this into something. And maybe you end up kind of setting the standard. You become the bar for what other programs around the country want to do, being like, hey, like you said with the Battery in Atlanta, so many other sports teams, not only in baseball, say, we want a Battery like Atlanta. We want a Battery like Atlanta. You could be the same thing with college football, saying, man, did you see what South Carolina did for their football stadium or the area around it? We want something like that creates this full immersive experience. And maybe one day you move a baseball stadium over there. Maybe one day, if you get sick of Colonial Life Arena, you build a basketball venue out there and just make it a full-on sports complex. Like, again, it's easy to spend up other people's money to do this, but the possibilities really are kind of endless here.
And I know some people might be turned off by this idea, and certainly South Carolina still has a ways to go. Jay Phillips and I, we've talked about this a good bit. But at some point, South Carolina will legalize gambling. And I feel like if you have a place like that, my goodness, you have a sports betting area right there. I can only imagine the money that would get generated, especially when you think about the fact that there's so many people that come through Columbia, and whether it's Airbnbs or renting out a hotel, so many people come through here for multiple reasons throughout the year. Think of the Masters, right? I mean, there's so many different graduations. I know South Carolina Columbia would love to be able to host another NCAA tournament for men's. Think back to a couple of years ago when they did that. And I think one of the concerns, if I remember correctly, is that they would want to have more hotels available.
Yep.
This would certainly be able to fix that problem if you were building more hotels or whatever you'd add over there. It can help not just South Carolina from a Gamecock standpoint, but it can help the city. It can help the state. I think it will be an absolute, again, game changer. But, I mean, I keep using those words. I know those are their words, but I can't think of anything other than that because it really would just change just the landscape of everything.
Well, and you brought up a really good, important point, too, the recruiting aspect of this.
Yeah.
Because, and look, we've talked to guys in here on the Garnet Trust Hour like, hey, what do you like to do in Columbia? And there's not a ton of options. There are things to do, but not as many as some of these other places around the country that, you know, you can say, hey, go to this place, you can do this, this, and this when you're not focusing on football, whatever it may be. So you add some entertainment things down there. Again, I don't know, maybe it's axe throwing, maybe it's Top Golf, putt-putt, I don't know, something along those lines. It just gives people more things to do. And I'm not saying that's going to suddenly mean you're going to sign the #1 class every single year, but could it entice a couple more recruits? Possibly.
Yeah, Johnny 3-Star. I was going to say Johnny 4-Star, but we'll say Johnny 3-Star. Johnny 3-Star is going to come to Columbia because he wants to play a little putt-putt and throw some axes.
Well, then he can meet the people down there that aren't impressed with his 3-star ranking.
Yeah, there you go.
No, those people just complain online. That's all. But again, this is such a cool thing to see eventually come to fruition. It's not going to happen next year. It's not going to happen the year after that. It's going to take a lot of time. That's a lot of land to develop down there. But again, when you have this space, and I don't know what the zoning or the land itself allows to be built on it, because again, you are kind of talking about swampy, or not swampy areas, but what is it called? Floodplains, I think, that may limit the kind of things you can put out there. But whatever you can, maximize it to whatever possible degree.
I'm interested to hear what people want, right? Like in a perfect world, like you have an opportunity to throw anything out there. Take away the fact of, okay, you need to have this type of, soil to build on this. Like, put all that out. Like, take all the physics away. Just like when you were like a kid, what was like your dream bedroom? Think of it in that terms. What would you want? What would be the dream scenario for you in terms of restaurants, activities, whatever? I'm interested to hear what people would have to say about that.
Let us know. Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100. One person already weighed in. Buc-ee's.
A Buc-ee's.
Now, the Buc-ee's might take up all 900 of those acres.
I was going to say. I'll tell you what.
I like the way you're thinking.
Our very own Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, we introduced him to Buc-ee's not too long ago. I think he has a Buc-ee's addiction. We might have to sit him down and tell him, like, hey, Jack, you got to ease up, man.
I had never been to a Buc-ee's until I moved out here. And because in Georgia, they have one in Warner Robins. They built one recently, I think in the Marietta area. I haven't been out that way. But when me and my wife moved here 2 years ago, within a month, we made a Saturday trip out of going to Buc-ee's out in Florence. It was like census overload.
It's a life-changing experience.
It really was. I mean, it was good. I got some of the brisket sandwich, all that kind of stuff. But it was. I was like, I've never driven this far for a gas station before, but I'm glad that I did.
I think it's too far off from the highway. I mean, that's the beauty about Buc-ee's, right?
Sure.
You're in and out. You're right there.
Yeah,
So,
the location probably isn't the most feasible thing.
you
in the
imagine.
world for it.
You imagine, even if they found a way to do it, a Buc-ee's right across the street from an SEC stadium on game day. I mean, you want to talk about added traffic? My goodness.
Isn't there one in Auburn?
If there is, I haven't been, and I will not go anywhere close to it on game day if there is.
I think there's one. I don't know if it's right there at Jordan-Hare Stadium or not, but I believe there's one out in Auburn that I'm sure, gets overrun on game day. I mean, look, Buc-ee's in any day is busy. Like, you can go there in the middle of the week, and it's going to be overrun.
You can go
with
at
people.
like 10 o'clock at night, and it's busy.
That's right, because they are 24 hours as well.
Unbelievable.
But I like the way that you're thinking. And again, we're not telling you anything's the wrong answer. If you want to build a Chuck E. Cheese down there, I mean, go for it.
I mean, depending on how old you are. I mean, if a Colin Taylor says, hey, I want a Chuck E. Cheese, and he doesn't have any kids, I might look at Colin a little differently.
Don't act your A's, act your shoe size. If you're still a kid
I'll tell you what I'd love. You talk about putt-putt. Have you seen, I think they have a couple out there in Arizona, Tiger Woods has designed like a course for just putting. And it's like mini golf, but it's like a real
like a
golf
serious
course.
putt-putt. Yeah.
Like that would be neat. Because I feel like in a place like South Carolina, weather-wise,
sure.
you could get away with that at a place like here.
You're telling me there's no like clowns or pinwheels or anything like that on
If you
his golf
want,
course?
we can have that across on the other side. I mean, there's so much land there.
You can have, because that, putt-putt it's designed for kids, right? It's fun. It's, introduces people to golf, but it's really kind of tailored towards younger kids. Anybody can play it, but imagine having the option of like, all right, you can go on the kiddie course, you can go to the Tiger Woods course. Like,
That'd be cool.
Hey kids, go have fun. We're going to go over here and play the Tiger Woods putt-putt.
See, I took Brooke out for a little putt-putt not too long ago, and I struggled on one hole, and it threw my game off. And I will give her credit. She won, which I was very upset about because I went golfing a couple days prior. So I'm trying to like really set this thing up.
Sure.
And I struggled on one hole, threw everything off. I would have been like, oh, okay, you think you're good? All right, let's go over here. We're going to the big course now. Okay.
Take her to the links and see what happens.
Exactly.
That might drop your star rating
I'm not
from
gonna-
a 2.5 down to maybe a 1.
I'm not going to go to the actual course, but take her to the Tiger Woods putt-putt golf course.
Yeah.
Like you said, go across
There
on the
you go.
other side of this big complex.
Well, if that gets built, I would love to see you do that.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be pretty funny. I don't know if she'd be on board with that, but we'll see. We'll continue to hit the headlines of what's going on today on this edition of the Halftime Show. Pat McAfee returning to College Game Day? Maybe, maybe not. We'll hit that coming up next. Is the Halftime Show. He's Mike Uva. I'm Tyler Head here on the game.
Frank.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Mike Yuba hanging out on this Thursday. Reminder once again, Jay and Elijah are going to be broadcasting live from Old Mill Brew Pub coming up on the postgame show from 3 until 6, 711 East Main Street out in Lexington. Also early game tomorrow morning from 6 until 9 at Liberty on the Lake, 1602 Marina Road out in Irmo. Proceeds out there. Going to be going to the Big Red Barn Retreat in Blythewood. And we're continuing on with what's trending at 2. Pat McAfee is a very polarizing figure in the sports media world and made his debut as a full-time member of College Game Day last season, in replacement for David Pollack, Gene Wojnarowski, some of those guys that moved on, Tom Rinaldi, and, stirred up his share of controversy, to say the least. Well, we're 72 days away from the season kicking off, and he's not yet re-signed to the College Game Day roster. He is aware of the criticism that's out there from people that may not like his style of broadcasting on College Game Days, and we might be without him this upcoming fall.
I think he's trying to get a little bit more money. I think I don't know if it's
possibly.
I mean, he's making a lot right now with everything that he's doing. And I don't think he's necessarily trying to like nickel and dime. It's probably part of that combined with some type of power control. I don't know what he wants. Maybe he wants the ability to do something that would allow him to free up some extra time. Or I know this sounds silly, but even being able to have access to a jet to make his traveling easier. I mean,
so.
We see that with Kirk Herbstreit. I mean, he's flying all over the place. So I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating more than anything.
Sure.
But I expect him to still be there come fall. I just think right now it's just like, wait a minute, huh?
And, I get it. He's not everybody's cup of tea. He's very entertaining. And is he somebody that's going to go up there and give you an X's and O's breakdown on offense or defense? Probably not. But he brings that entertainment value that show is known for and has been known for a long time. And Lee Corso occupied that spot very well for so many years. Obviously, his health has declined now where he's not able to do that anymore. And, he has to script out all of his stuff, still does his headgear segments, which I hope he does as long as he possibly can, because I never want to see that go away. But the show was kind of lacking that entertainment piece to a degree that I feel like McAfee has added to it. And again, not everybody likes that. I get that. But from an entertainment standpoint, I think he accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish.
I think if you don't like McAfee, it's probably a fatigue factor because he's everywhere. And whether or not you watch WWE or you watch the Pat McAfee show, if you're on social media, you're seeing things pop up constantly and you're seeing him. So I get that. You can have a fatigue factor. I do think one of the other things that's good about having someone like McAfee, because he played in the pros, and I know multiple people up on that stage. I mean, Heisman winners too, for crying out loud, with Desmond Howard. But there's just a part of him that I feel like, from a guest standpoint, they feel comfortable to open up. I mean, I think back to that Army-Navy game day at Gillette Stadium. Bill Belichick looked like a kid on Christmas. We were talking about Christmas earlier.
We've never seen Bill Belichick like that.
So, and we've seen Nick Saban open up on the Pat McAfee show.
Who will be on the desk this year at College Game Day as well.
Correct. So, look, again, just like anything in life, not everything is going to be catered to certain people, and that's okay.
Sure.
That's why there's Coke. That's why there's Pepsi. That's why you can get a cheeseburger. That's why you can get a hamburger. You can get a steak. You can get a chicken when you go to. Not everything's going to be for everyone. I get that.
McAfee reminds me a little bit of like an indie rock band that when they're very small and like niche, everybody loves them. But as soon as they get into like that mainstream, that's when people start to turn like, oh, I liked him better when he was just at Barstool when his thing was independent, not in ESPN. And it's kind of funny how those kind of things can apply in different ways like this.
That's life though, right? I mean, think about it from a sports standpoint where people will build an athlete up, and then as soon as they get to the top or as they're climbing, that's when people want to knock them down.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's people out there trying to knock down McAfee, but if this was, say, 3-4 years ago, it felt like there were more people saying, like, all right, like, this is cool. Like, again, not saying everyone was Team McAfee, but, again, when you're on what feels like every other channel and doing multiple jobs on different networks, I can understand the fatigue factor that some people probably have with him.
I just want Game Day to get the original Big and Rich back to sing the intro song. I love Darius Rucker, as does everybody in South Carolina, but the fact that they're still singing the same song, it didn't make sense to me. If you're going to change up the band, change up the song too, because you're just reminding me of what was a better version of the song before.
I agree.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if maybe Big and Rich's contract ended and it was too much, but I don't know. They should have changed it up completely if they're going to do that.
It was iconic.
It was. I mean, I still listen to the original song itself from their album and just put in my own lyrics of where, they name all the college towns or whatever.
I can see you turning that on like your phone when game day turns on and you just mute the intro part that has like Darius and everyone singing.
I'm going to start doing that. I really am. And again, no disrespect to Darius, and I forget who all else is involved in that, but they're singing a Les Goods version of the song.
It's like following in the footsteps of a legendary coach. It's like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You just have a tough act to follow up.
They are the Kalen DeBoer of the college game day intro.
Oh, how long do we think he's going to be there for?
That's a great question. That's the biggest mystery of this college football season.
Because everything's changing with the conference. Everything's changing with college football. I'm not talking about the portal and NIL. I'm talking about the college football playoff itself. We understand standards are changing for college football teams in regards to you can have multiple losses still go to the playoff. But, I mean, you have 3 losses at Alabama. Everyone thinks the world's coming to an end.
Their first conference game is against Georgia on September the 28th at home. If they get run over in that game, I think, I'm not going to say they're going to run them out of town that day, but it's going to get off to a bad start. And everything after that is going to be under increased scrutiny, even more than he already is, in my opinion.
That Gerard Mayo coming in and following the footsteps of Belichick in New England, that's tough. But that job, I mean... but it's different.
The difference between that is the Belichick years were starting to dwindle a little bit.
Correct.
They were not as good as they were at the height of their success. Alabama, in what was still not the best season under Nick Saban, they were still in the college football playoff and won the SEC. So you're taking over a program that is still right here.
Correct.
As opposed to the Patriots, they're probably somewhere around here. So there's still an element with the Gerard Mayo of having, okay, let's build back up what we had. This is keep this on the track, Kalen DeBoer, and don't crash the Corvette. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out there. I've heard different things already from some of the players that are over there right now, and some players want to go there and play for Nick Saban. I totally understand that. And it's weird to look at that Alabama A and think of anyone else, at least in the last 15 years or so.
And I'll give him credit. Now, you did have some guys that transferred out, but it was not quite the mass exodus of players that I thought it was going to be, because again, most guys come in and say, I want to play for Nick Saban, I want to be developed, I want to go to the NFL and make all the money that way. When he left, I thought, man, they're going to lose so many guys because they want to go play for Kirby or Sarkisian or somebody else that thinks they can do the same thing instead of somebody that they're not sure about in Kalen DeBoer. And again, they still did have some guys that left. Caleb Downs went to Ohio State and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, they held the roster intact, still recruited really, really well. So I think they have the pieces in place to still be successful. But it does boil down to how he coaches.
It's going to be telling this offseason. This offseason coming up.
Yep.
How many players are they able to retain? Because I'm sure there's multiple players on that team that are going to give him an opportunity. And that's the right thing to do. It will be very interesting. I know we're kind of judging a guy before he even has an opportunity to do anything there, but that's what talking season's all about.
Absolutely. We will hit the greatest day in the history of the world coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. He is Mike Yuba from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Thursday here on The Game.
Who keeps calling me? 993. Why do I keep getting this number from Beverly?
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yu from Gamecock Central hanging out on this Thursday. It is indeed time for the greatest day in the history of the world. Started off 2004. On this day, Ken Griffey Jr. hit his 500th career home run. Now, there was a long time where people thought Ken Griffey Jr. might be the next person to rival Hank Aaron's home run record. A lot of injuries plagued him during the middle of his career, and obviously ended up playing to 2010. But, man, hitting the 500 mark, that's an accomplishment.
When you think of that era of baseball, especially when you're talking about the steroid era, it feels like you're not going to find just a room full of people that will always agree on a player being great.
Sure.
You can't say anything negative about Ken Griffey, though. I mean,
No.
Oh, what a phenomenal player. What a phenomenal batter. The look, right? The backwards hat, the twitch with the bat. He was just so fun to watch. Fun to watch, regardless of what team you were a fan of.
He absolutely was. And again, you know, I remember the latter half of his career. I was born in 96. I wish I would have been alive or more aware enough in my younger years to appreciate what I was witnessing with him, if that makes sense.
He was so fun. I'll never forget the 99 All-Star game. It was at Fenway, but, I mean, the talent that week just alone. Like, if you see, like, the intro for the lineups, I mean, it was incredible. But him in the home run derby against McGuire and Sosa, those were some fun years, man. Those were some fun years watching baseball then.
And that was the who's who during the home run race and all that kind of stuff. Now, yes, there was a lot of juice being passed around at that point in time.
Yeah,
but
that was just the year after that 98 home run chase, which was incredible.
That was a really fun 30 for 30, by the way. That home run chase,
yeah.
the one, it was 2 years ago, whenever it was, they came out with that. Again, something I didn't get to experience myself at the time, but really cool to look back on. And it was like, I mean, baseball is obviously popular, but baseball was like front page news nationally in sports every single day. And like, that's something that unfortunately it's become more regionalized. And yes, you know, like, you're a fan of the Red Sox, fan of the Braves, like, we pay attention to what our teams do, but most of the time things don't get national attention in baseball as much as they used to.
Oh, it was incredible. I remember that home run chase like it was yesterday, and that race, and just waking up every day. And at that time, it wasn't like it is now, right? I mean, if McGuire had hit a home run in today's era or Sosa, you would instantly see it on social media. You had to tune into, like, Sports Center. You're trying to watch, or you wake up in the morning, you're trying to watch it on Sports Center. And at that point, like you said, later in the year, the news channels had it on. The news channels had it on. Oh, Sosa hit another home run last night. Oh, McGuire hit a home run. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that, they're a bunch of cheaters. I get that. Yeah. But no one can take away what those memories were like, just waking up. And shoot, even Barry Bonds, when he was chasing Hank Aaron, which I'm sure drives a lot of people down here crazy, because I know there's a lot of Braves fans. There's just something about home run chase and race, and just those races when there's two of them going. Oh, it's awesome.
The most recent example we had was the Judge thing, where they kept cutting into college football.
That drove me nuts.
To show you
his
nuts. Second inning at bat against the Tigers or whatever, which I think we all collectively got sick of. And that's the thing, too, is like ESPN, look, again, baseball's a very widely loved sport, but people watching Kentucky and Mizzou at 3:30 on a Saturday don't care what Aaron Judge is doing in the Yankees game.
No, they don't. And I don't know. I don't want to say that people don't care about baseball the same way they used to from a Major League Baseball standpoint.
They definitely don't. I mean, you're not controversial in saying that.
No, I don't know. I've had multiple thoughts on why baseball, the ratings have declined in a lot of ways.
Sure.
I think one reason why is, and again, more so speaking about Major League Baseball, because certainly the passion in the South when it comes to college baseball, I mean, it's there. But I think one reason why is just as our attention spans are so much shorter, right? You know, if there's a commercial break, I mean, how quickly do a lot of us go down to our phones and we're looking for something, right?
Just
I mean,
about every time.
So the attention span itself, and I think that plays a role with it because baseball, in comparison to some other sports, it's slower.
Which they've done a good job.
They've done a great
the
job.
The pitch clock has helped out.
Absolutely. And I love baseball. I don't want to seem like I'm a baseball hater. I love baseball.
Absolutely. And a lot of people are skeptical of the pitch clock. It's done its intended job. And it's one of those things that now, a year and a half into it, you really don't pay attention to. It's just part of the game, and it doesn't, you'll have the occasional violation or whatever, but it's nothing detrimental to the game like so many people were, forecasting it to be in February of last year or whatever.
Yeah, and I know there's going to be people that will say, well, the beauty of going to the ballpark is you're going to be there for about 3 hours. You're going to enjoy the weather. I get that. Unfortunately, though, when you're playing 162 games, you could go to all 81 at home.
Yeah.
That's a long year, man.
It is.
That's a long year when you're trying to grow the sport, and we just talked about it. I mean, I'm in my early 30s. The attention span of people in their 20s and, 15 years old, 18, all that, I mean, it's even smaller now. So if I'm saying this from a 30-something-year-old perspective,
sure.
I know it's just the attention spans are continuing to get shorter and shorter, and you're trying to grab that audience because that audience is eventually going to be in their 20s and their 30s and 40s, and they're trying to do everything they can to sell the game to that generation too.
This was also a very good day in the history of the Miami Heat. They won their first NBA title back in 2006, and then they won their second of the back-to-back in 2013. That was the Big Three era, obviously, with LeBron and them, when they beat the Spurs in game number 7.
Ray Allen played some
right.
high school hoops not too far from here.
That's right. Absolutely. So, it's funny, because obviously Dwayne Wade was there before LeBron and Bosh and all those guys got there, but I feel like that 06 title is forgotten about.
It is, and I think there's a lot of people that know, okay, D. Wade played with Shaq,
sure,
but it's amazing when I hear people talk about, Kobe and Shaq, they won all these titles together. I think people forget sometimes, like, well, Shaq also won one without Kobe.
Yeah.
And obviously he played with another phenomenal player.
Sure.
That's not taking anything away from the late, great Kobe, but yeah, that was the beginning of the end for Shaq, which, man, talk about a fun player to watch. I mean, he changed the game. He really did. And there was a lot of great bigs, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But his size and just his power, it was freakish.
Speaking of somebody with size, last one here for the greatest day in the history of the world, 2019 is the day that Zion Williamson got drafted #1 overall by the New Orleans Pelicans. His time at Duke, the aura that was around him and what people thought he was going to be as a professional basketball player, in my lifetime was something that I felt like I hadn't seen before. And I obviously LeBron didn't play in college. He just came straight out of high school. But people were equating it to what the LeBron hype was. Now, again, Zion's dealt with a lot of injuries so far in the NBA, and he's been good. He's made some all-star teams. Like, he's done fine, but he's not been what I think people were expecting him to be up to this point.
I remember covering his last high school game, and I had never witnessed what took place right afterwards, which was game's done, and you had like grown men rushing the court. I mean, you had fans too, but you had grown men rushing the court,
sure,
trying to get his autograph.
Yeah,
and you had police coming out, like helping this guy get to the line just to shake hands with the other team.
Right.
That's done with, and he's like sitting in the stands. I don't think he was sitting on the bench, but he was sitting on the stands like a couple rows back, and you had like police around him trying to give him space. And then he did, his interviews afterwards. He didn't go on the team bus right after. I think he went back probably home with his parents, or he stayed for like an extra hour or two.
Yeah.
And there's a huge line on the outside part. I think this was at the Sumter Civic Center or one of the Civic Centers, so I apologize if it's not the right one. But there was like a track on the outside, and he's signing autographs. The next game's going on, and there's just a huge line. It felt like half the stadium was just in line trying to get an autograph with Zion.
Yeah. No, and absolutely. We knew he was a special player coming out of high school, and obviously saw that in his time at Duke as well. I remember the firestorm of when his shoe blew out. I think it was in the North Carolina game, and all that came from that. And again, everybody expected him to just be that.
Thank God it wasn't at South Carolina with an Under Armour shoe, because people would still be talking about that to this day.
That's absolutely true. And again, he's had a fine career in the NBA so far, but he's not been what people thought he was going to be up to this point.
And when you have that type of exposure like he had at that age and the things that he was doing, it's tough to live up to the expectations. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to make it seem like he's been just an absolute bust. I'm sure some people would say that. Injuries have played a huge part in that. But it's tough. And that's why, as much as I'm not a LeBron James fan,
Sure.
I can appreciate his greatness, because I remember when he was coming out of high school and just the anointment that he received. He's like, hey, you're the next thing.
Yeah.
We're anointing him as the next big thing, and he's lived up to the expectation and then some. So, I mean, it's tough when you have that type of pressure put on you at that age.
Absolutely. That's the greatest day in the history of the world. We'll come back, hit our Firehouse Subs text of the hour, wrap up today's edition of the Halftime Show. He's Mike Huber from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Mike Yuba on your Thursday here. A couple more minutes to go. Again, Jay and Elijah coming up in just a few minutes from Old Mill Brew Pub, 711 East Main Street in Lexington for today's edition of the postgame show. Want to hit the Firehouse Subs text line, get back to some of your ideas of what you'd like to see down by Williams-Brice Stadium when all the development is finished. York weighs in and says a venue that can also be rented for indoor and outdoor events at reasonable off-season prices. So some kind of event center down there, or something that, I don't know, if you want to get married out by Williams-Brice Stadium, I guess you could do that as well, or host, I don't know, parties, events, company stuff. A lot of possibilities, I guess.
Throw a couple extra $1,000 and Ray Tanner or Shane Beamer or Don Staley will officiate your wedding.
Could you get married in Williams-Brice Stadium?
I'm sure you could.
Well,
I mean, there's been people that have got married at like ballparks.
Yeah.
I mean, Pokey Reese, Lower Richland legend, I believe him and his wife Sharetta, a couple of years back, they got married at the Firefly Stadium.
Okay. Yeah.
They had like a baseball theme. I think they got married like at home plate.
Yeah. Okay. That works. I got a buddy that got married at the 755 Club at Turner Field when the Braves used to actually play there. And he and his wife are like mega Braves fans, so it's not like she wasn't on board with that. But I guess as long as the wife is okay with getting married at a sports venue, that's cool.
I wonder what hurdles you would need to go through to get approved for a wedding at Williams-Brice, because I've seen some of there was an analyst, I think Weber was his last name, and I believe they had like the reception at Williams-Brice. I don't know if he actually got married like at the stadium.
Yeah. I don't know. If you're a high enough level donor, I'm sure you can make.
You just
some
know
things
a
happen.
guy. You just call a guy up, be like, "Hey, Shane," or "Hey, Ray, you think I can get married here?"
The question: could you get married at like halftime of a game? Because I mean, you know
where that would, I think, is. You would expect it to have happened. Would be Vegas.
You would, yeah. It's a good point.
I mean, that's something maybe I'm going to have to ask. I know Age is staying busy right now. I'll have to ask her dad if he's seen that at all. Roscoe, the legend. He's seen anyone get married out there during like halftime of an Aces game.
I'm going to quickly search halftime wedding and see if anything comes up, because you're probably right. I imagine it has happened at some point, some kind of venue here.
Major League Baseball going out to Vegas. That could be something you can do in between innings, because people get married down the street at the little chapel, get married in between innings at a baseball game.
That's very true. How
romantic.
I have a video here that says couple got married at halftime of an NBA game. This was apparently at a Mavericks game over a year ago. So I guess it is possible. Now you have plenty of witnesses.
You do.
Now, yeah, does that mean like Beamer would sign off on your marriage certificate or something that he... Well, I guess he'd have to be ordained to do that.
You could just go online.
But no, look at this. I mean, they have full-on wedding. Halftime of a... Dad's walking the bride out there, the whole 9 yards.
I'm just waiting for a player to just come from behind and try to go into their shooting routine. It's like, all right, Pops, out of the way. I got to get my free throws in.
Got the parents and grandparents sitting out there at half court as well, or mid court. I mean, yeah, I guess that's possible. So maybe you don't need the wedding venue. Maybe you can just, if you can pull enough strings, just get married at Willie B.
I would love to see that happen. I would love to see that happen at Williams-Brice Stadium. That'd be cool.
Now, I'm sure there's a lot of guys right now thinking, hell yeah, let's do it. And their significant others saying, no, we're not getting married at a football stadium.
I actually was joking with the girlfriend about this. I actually brought this up probably about a month ago.
Okay.
We were just talking about different, like, we're not engaged right now, but we were just talking, like, we getting, like,
of course,
venue, like, about like a football stadium, like, I don't know, like Williams-Brice, because, she's from South Carolina, I'm a Boston guy.
Totally.
Where would you have the wedding? And then, I think she made a joke like, what if it was at a football stadium? I'm like, what, Williams-Brice? So, I don't know.
Well, if that inevitably happens down the road, let us know. We'll all be there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Shane, let us know if I can use the football stadium as a venue. You'll get an invite, you and Emily.
You've got enough. You got enough inside track than most people. I feel like you could potentially pull that off. Somebody also suggested a horse track.
Horse track
down there. Now you need the legalized sports gambling, like we talked about, which I would hope by the time this is all built, we've done that, because
it will happen at some point. Again,
legal in North Carolina now.
I don't know if Jay's listening right now. If he wants to continue this conversation when they hop on a little bit, but we've talked about it. This was maybe, I don't know, a year or two ago, and he said it's still, it still has a ways to go, but I'm hoping it will happen simply because I've seen the impact it's had in different states, Massachusetts, like the holes that they're able to fill in the street. I mean, just little things.
Sure.
The money that it generates, it's just like anything in life, okay? At some point, get with the times.
Well, it's like you can either do it here or you can watch everybody go across the state line to North Carolina and do it. Up to you.
Well, I think that will be the biggest thing. You see what's going on in the other states around you, and you're going to be like, all right, well, okay, we got to catch up because we're losing money to North Carolina or whatever state that's around you.
A casino and a horse track next to an SEC football stadium. Sounds great to me. We'll throw Buc-ee's in there just for the heck of it.
My goodness. I'm getting excited.
Nobody's ever going to leave this area, whatever we're going to end up calling it.
No.
It's going to be perfect.
I just think about, you talk about legalizing gambling and I'm just thinking about the tourist attraction it would bring to Myrtle Beach and Charleston. But certainly Columbia would be able to get a boost for sure. But yeah, it would. I think people would continue to want to retire from up north and come down and live in Myrtle Beach.
I was going to say, you'll have a lot more of your friends hitting you up about coming to Columbia or
there you go.
Us down to the state of South Carolina. Well, Mike, I enjoyed it. What's your assessment of your first 3-hour show?
We have to go back. We'll have to watch the tape. Did some good things, but could have cleaned things up maybe in that second hour.
Thankfully, we have our tape sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media, where you can indeed go back and watch this entire thing.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. There's different things with TV, and been fortunate to do that for a long time. You guys do a great job with radio. You do. It's especially this time of the year. It can get slow. We were prepping for the show yesterday. We were texting. I'm just like, man, it's not just come on and turn the microphone on. So
no, it is not.
There's a lot that goes into it. So
got to get creative.
Not that people really want to hear me like giving you a pat on the back, but it was fun, man.
We certainly appreciate it. Always enjoy having you in here, and I'm sure you'll be back in before too long again.
Well, let's do it.
That'll do it for today's edition of the Halftime Show. Again, post-game show with Jay and Elijah out at Old Mill Brew Pub in Lexington coming up next, right here on The Game. 3 o'clock, welcome in. It is now time for the post-game show. Jay and Elijah are going to be broadcasting live out at Old Mill Brew Pub in just a few minutes. We'll get you out there to them once they get everything situated. That's the funny thing about doing a remote sometimes is those old technical gremlins can rear their ugly heads at times. So we'll get you out to them at Old Mill Brew Pub as soon as we possibly can. But I don't mind hanging around with you guys for a few more minutes as while they get everything squared away out there. A lot of things going on in a time where there's not a lot of things going on. That's the funny thing about summer. We talk about it all the time. We are indeed in the dog days as the sports calendar starts to slow down a little bit with the NBA Finals just wrapping up the other night. You have the Stanley Cup playoffs, which are Stanley Cup Finals, which are continuing on and set to wrap up here very, very soon. College baseball going to be done this weekend with Tennessee and Texas A&M playing for the national championship starting on Saturday, and then we'll just have that period of time where it's nothing but Major League Baseball leading us up to the start of the college and pro football season. Only 72 days until South Carolina kicks things off against Old Dominion. So if anything, it's good to have a little reprieve, right? Good to have a time to kind of breathe in, breathe out, relax a little bit before the stress of college football and pro football, for that matter, kind of consume all of our lives for the end of the year as we try and see what the season's going to be, and in particular, a lot of stress is going to be around the South Carolina football program as we enter year number 4 of the Shane Beamer era. And, we talked to Chris Doering, Mike Yuba and I did, back in the 1 o'clock hour. And, I asked him about how tough of a climb it's going to be for South Carolina now that the SEC's getting increasingly harder with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the fold. You're abandoning divisions. You're opening up the conference to where you can't even go the route of saying, hey, let's try and win the East. It's no, you got to be one of the top 2 teams in the conference to try and get yourself to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. And with that, there's a level of expectation with this team this year where. And Doring put it the perfect way, and this is something that we've talked about plenty. You almost had success too quickly with Shane Beamer, and that sounds like I'm saying that in a negative way because it's great that you had the success that you had, but it creates a level of expectation for the program that when things take a bit of a step back like last year did, then it becomes very glaring. And I'm not presenting this like, oh, no, Beamer's on the hot seat or, he's at risk of losing his job or anything like that. He's not. Now, yes, if South Carolina loses all 12 games this year, then we're going to have a different conversation. But I can safely – I feel pretty confident saying Beamer's job is safe. But that being said, there is a lot of pressure and a lot of eyes on this program going into 2024 to see if they can get things back on track. And what does back on track mean? That is a definition that could vary depending on who you talk to. In my honest opinion, I think just getting yourself back to a bowl game is good. And in my opinion, acceptable, because that's the one thing you were not able to do a season ago. Now, we can go back and thoroughly examine those 7 games that South Carolina lost to say which ones could have gone differently, and we certainly look at the Florida game where you can't get stops in the fourth quarter, and the Clemson game where it felt like your offense was not up to snuff of where it needed to be to make that game, competitive, despite the fact that your defense did a really good job of holding Clemson at bay. This year, as we talked about so much and mentioned several times today, you've done what you've needed to do. You've gone out in the transfer portal. You've brought in a ton of talent at seemingly every position, at least to some degree. And so much of that talent is experienced. And, I know it may not be the most attractive thing to look at some of these guys that may be coming from Group of 5 schools, but you look at how much football they've played. And, yeah, maybe the competition level that they played against was not the SEC necessarily, but it's still worth something, the amount of football that they played up to this point, to where you hope that they come in. And this isn't perfect, by the way. There's going to be guys that are coming in from the transfer portal that aren't going to contribute much at all. There's going to be guys that we thought were going to be great that aren't going to end up being great. But in the same way, like we talked about a little bit earlier when it comes to recruiting, the more high-level talent that you bring in, the better your chances are of being successful with those guys. And that doesn't mean that every 5-star is going to turn out to be amazing. That doesn't mean every 3-star, doesn't amount to anything. As you've talked about a little bit earlier on, that the got on a soapbox about the 3-star problem that people have with South Carolina and its and its recruiting class. But when you go out in the transfer portal and you bring in a lot of guys that play a lot of football and been successful at varying levels, it should be a reason to get you excited. Now, again, we don't know how else it's going to shake out. We don't know.